And welcome to the Moriah Nightly News. I apologize to those who were watching a minute ago. I am starting to get annoyed by these constant tech problems. Things started screeching over here, and there's not much I can. Sometimes I can fix it, and sometimes I cannot. So I do apologize for that. But in any case, we will try for take two, because from the nation to Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. As I had begun to mention, the Iran war negotiations continue in the Middle East with that MOU in place over there, and that the key changes on the negotiating table that Iran is insistent on bringing into the conflict is the inclusion of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. The U.S. has wanted to separate these two things and make them more or less two separate entities, if you will, to negotiate. But this is a tactic that Iran is using to its advantage. The concern for President Trump that the Wall Street Journal has noted in its reporting, at least towards the end of last week, is that as negotiations continue, it may drag on further than the president or longer than the president would like. Noting, of course, some of the previous talks with Iran, the most notable would be the 2015 Iran deal that was negotiated during the Obama years and later scrapped by the president. But it also highlighted talks as far back as 2003 during President Bush's administration, where Iran has a tendency to use bait and switch negotiation techniques, to use maybe distraction techniques would be the better way to phrase it, to discuss what it wants to talk about, what they want to talk about, and not discuss what's important for nuclear disarmament and more thorny issues like that for U.S. negotiators. Trump appeared, as it noted, to not want to go back to war either way. That is coming per their reporting through his negotiators, indicating that he is indifferent towards the idea of going back to war, that he would prefer to not do that. And so we will continue to follow that and see how all of that plays out. The Strait of Hormuz is currently open. They are beginning to profit, the Iranians, that's the they're beginning to profit from those oil revenues. And so we'll see how that all pans out. I would have, as I've stated in my previous reporting, would have preferred a swifter military decision on that, but we'll take what we can get. It was also noted, as I noted on Friday, his business dealings in the Middle East. The Qatari airplane that's a Boeing 747, not just any old airplane, that he received from the Qatari government last year, was put into service this past week just in time for America's 250th celebration. A $400 million overhaul was included there to bolster that for security purposes and bring it up to date in terms of basically national security, making sure that the president can operate in that aircraft more or less with the same amount of security as if he were in the White House, is how it was phrased, according to the Wall Street Journal. The jet will replace the previous Boeing 747 style aircraft that had been in service since the first Bush administration in the early 1990s. Interestingly enough, around the world, that along with America 250 this past weekend, China also has marked the 105th anniversary of the Communist Party's founding in China. According to the Wall Street Journal, on their article on that anniversary, with President Xi observing that milestone, the U.S. did not want, or China rather, did not want to replace U.S. global dominance, but reshape it to better represent developing countries. That is how the article phrased that. And I would not believe that for a second. In the midst of that, it was also noted that China had put trade pressure on Europe in the midst of its heat wave and crisis, as China, as remember, many in Europe were looking to trade with China for air conditioners. But the note of AC has become a contentious topic for the Europeans, as many in Europe don't want the technology there, and others do. Boy, we're just having all kinds of issues. So, as you can imagine, those on the left are very much against it, complaining about the environmental issues and the aesthetics for those in Europe. As many as 1,000 had died in France, as I had reported last week. And in one French community, one gentleman with a disability there was facing a lawsuit for his use of an air conditioner in France. So that is a little bit about what Europe is facing. It was also interesting to note that only 5% of homes in England have AC. So, with that being said, the energy crisis here at home continues to heat up. Yes, I intended that pun there. With a fine coming out today that the Adirondack Explorer reported on for a wetlands violation from the solar company Radiance Solar, operating here in the town of Moriah, that they are being required to pay, or ordered to pay, a $25,000 fine to the Adirondack Park Agency for an investigation that found improper water runoff on their property here. They found through a 10-month investigation that after they investigated a storm back on New Year's Day of last year, 2025, found that they had not properly implemented its storm and runoff pollution procedures, more or less, that led to major sediment runoff into a nearby wetland and stream. So that is, of course, why it is a water runoff and wetland violation, is what it is being called by the Adirondack Explorer's article there. It was a 10-month investigation that into this issue, and they noted that it was rare for the APA to issue a fine, let alone one that large. For example, the ones that were issued along with or in conjunction with those were not even in the same ballpark as that one. These were fines like $250 for a Ticonderoga homeowner that that built a dock in a wetland without a permit, or $500 for a marina violation in another instance. So these are not even close to being close in terms of the amount of money being paid there. But in any case, this was, again, a 10-month investigation over by the APA into this issue. The town of St. Armand, which we would know better perhaps as Bloomingdale, because that is around the Bloomingdale area, So it is not the same. It is Bloomingdale is just to the north. It appeared on the map, if I recall correctly. But they had just put it's a small community near Bloomingdale that just put in a 12-month moratorium against community solar projects. The decision was made, according to the Sun Community News, after our generation, the solar developer, approached the town wanting to develop a solar field, develop a solar project in their community. They rejected that project with a 12-month moratorium unanimously voted on by their board. According to the article, there was some more of a debate there over the efficacy or usefulness, if you will, on renewable energy, where it appeared that some were a little bit more supportive or in favor of it than those around here. So that was an interesting development on that front to our north, but they have for now put that on hold with a 12-month moratorium rather than the 6 month, at least for the best project that we see here in our region. And here in Moriah tonight, there was an update released over the weekend from in the Times of Thai, at least on the sale of Whistle Pig, which we had reported on a couple of weeks ago, that we had been confirmed or discussed at the Town of Moriah meeting a few days after that initial report. But it has been sold for $17.2 million to the Delaware-based Zags 26 LLC. As far as it appears right now, that we did not know back at that point in time, that operations will continue at that site as they have been with no new change, and they will continue to pay the full amount of taxes under the full assessment value as the previous owner has done. So there is no change in operation at this time, and they will continue on as they have done for the last decade or so at this point. So that is what has been going on around here. Perhaps somewhat quicker because of these tech issues that have been keeping me somewhat anxious here tonight. So with that, that is the the Moriah Nightly News for this Monday. Hoping that everything came out okay on the flip side, which I have no idea why that would give us such a problem. Hopefully I can fix that for Wednesday. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe on Facebook, and all of that. Have a good evening and good night.